I think I will get started as folks roll in. We will welcome you with open arms to today's Retail Media Reality Check. I'm Nick Weinheimer from Skai here. I'm our Chief Strategy Officer, joined by Caitlin and Molly, who I'll let introduce themselves as we get going. A couple of experts in our space from the brand Chomps in Caitlin's case, and from the agency VaynerMedia in Molly's case. So we really look forward to hearing their perspectives in this reality check. As we, I believe, marketed our event today as like webinar with strike-through language. So think of it as like a recorded podcast with maybe some Q&A at the end. We're going to have some fun. But as is common with a webinar, if you haven't used a computer before, here's where we'll give you the information about how you are experiencing today's not webinar. You all are in listen only mode, so scream and yell, let the toddlers go free, but stay tuned and focus because there's some interesting stuff going on. We will have a Q&A at the end. There will be a button for submitting your questions on your control panel. And we'll answer your questions if we have time at the end. We've already received some questions in advance. We're really excited about the way everyone's thinking, even before we've gone through some of the prepared discussion and data today. If you do have any issues, try switching from computer to phone or vice versa. Ask your Gen Z neighbor and see if you can get some help there. That usually solves the issues. And then please, at the end, there's a really quick survey that'll pop up. We really appreciate your feedback. We always want to make these as interesting as possible and continue to innovate the content that we're bringing with our great partners. And again, thank you, Molly and Caitlin, for joining. Look forward to chatting with you. So this is going to be a little different today for folks. There's going to be an audience poll, so you can't just lean back. You can, yeah, you probably need one hand for this, but sip your coffee. And please answer this question. How much budget do you think marketing leaders invest into retail media in comparison to laggards? So the poll should be popping up. How much budget do you think marketing leaders invest into retail media in comparison to laggards? Molly and Caitlin, no voting because you've been thinking about this one for days, but actually feel free. Um, I guess, do I have to vote? Oh my gosh. All right, let's see if I get it right. All right. We got a number of folks. Ooh, okay, you guys are quick on the draw with your clicker. Interesting. Okay, so folks, if you're not seeing this pop up, looks like a lot of you think about, about 40% of you think that, let me see if I'm reading this right. Excuse me, nearly half of you think that 40% is the amount that the leaders are spending. About 32% say 27%. A few of you say 12% and 55%. So I'm going to move on here and to give you a little background before I click to the next slide. We did, if you aren't familiar, we do annually run the State of Retail Media survey where we gather this data around issues and questions like this from our industry across a variety of different strategies and tactics and insights about how folks are operating their business from about 160 marketers across large brands and agencies that are focused in this space. So that's what's underpinning the data that you're going to see next, just in brief. And we're going to compare it to how you guys on this call are talking. So, leaders, whoever put in 27%, I believe it was some 32-ish percent of you, that's you're in line with what the respondents to the survey in aggregate, again, across those major magisteria of agencies and brands, leaders being, generally self-identifying as hitting all of their KPIs, exceeding their goals, really feeling like they're on the cutting edge of what they're doing. Laggards are spending about 4% less than that. So interesting to see some of you respond that way, and others to see that there's more in the leader space. And it'd be interesting to hear the feedback from our experts, again representing agency and brand side. So we've got some good coverage here. So again, repeating the question, how much budget do you think marketing leaders invest into retail media in comparison to laggards? Most people kind of just assume winners spend more. And in fact, we saw that in the poll just from this audience. So maybe, Caitlin, let me put a finer point on it, right? Like if you had 100,000 in incremental budget tomorrow, what do you do? Do you deepen your Amazon reach with more DSP, AMC custom audiences? Or are you leaning into maybe like a new network or a new tactic or some growth area, maybe like a TikTok shop and why? And please also
Yeah,
introduce yourself again to the group so they know your gig and your focus.
yeah. Caitlin Fundakowski, VP of Ecom and Digital Marketing at Chomps, oversee kind of all the levers we pull from a digital perspective, from a conversion standpoint. So wherever people are converting online for Chomps is kind of the channels that I oversee, and then like the media that's driving the traffic to do so. So I think it's an interesting question, and it's one that, we oftentimes talk about internally when we're weighing between channels and where to put budget. I think if I'm looking at a calculated conversion lens and want to drive immediate impact on a channel I know works, I'm putting it in the Amazon DSP. Amazon's unique in the sense of the measurement and follow through from top of funnel all the way down to conversion and repeat purchase. It's an extremely effective marketing lever that we've been able to pull over the years. And it still continues to drive results as we grow very quickly as a brand. I think they also have the traffic already on the platform, so that helps too. But if I'm looking at like a brand growth lens and we want to make a punchy investment, then I'm looking at a new platform like TikTok. And this one's actually top of mind for us right now. I think need to make sure if you're doing that, you have the right KPIs and things laid out. But um, we, we're looking at both side by side, and I think we have different reasons for each initiative.
So it seems like, I mean, just to read that back, I mean, nobody usually gives you money without some goal in mind, right?
Yeah.
Or you had the goals in place and now you get this Bluebird budget. So Molly, maybe can you follow up on that? Also, maybe give your a little feedback, or excuse me, background on where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm Molly Anderson. I am the retail media discipline lead at VaynerMedia, and two of my favorite people to share ideas with here with Nick and Caitlin, hopefully the rest of you as well too. I think similar to Caitlin, when we are looking at an immediate revenue impact, particularly if it's driving a single retailer, we're going to spend money in the retail media network and those channels, particularly like in Amazon or Walmart, where we've done that contribution analysis and know the impact that our media drives. However, for that like larger media goal and looking at driving total uplift with some benefit, we are looking at those prompts for how to drive commerce growth and looking at some of those channels where there might be underpriced attention to scale now, like a TikTok shop or a whatnot even too. And so that's where the mix, I think, still has other channels involved, even with commerce outcomes.
Well, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. Where are you seeing that kind of going down a couple different paths there, that which have you seen drive a little bit more impact for the business?
We have seen the immediate turnaround in a year-over-year share growth and comparison when investing into an Amazon or an Instacart, just saying, okay, we need that additional 100K or that additional investment to lap a previous year. But we have also in the past seen when we expand to new channels, like a DoorDash or a Last Miler is what I'm thinking of in their inaugural years, that those became really important pieces to grow another revenue area and seeing truly that immediate impact too from standing up media offerings there and where they have expanded and built in new offerings. And so I think similarly, it's a different engine with social that's able to provide outsized impact for growing brands.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned share growth, right? If your tactic is, share within a specific, key walled garden like Amazon, you're probably going to take a different tack. That said, we've seen some really interesting data and conversations in our customer advisory board around just how powerful layering TikTok in is in growth in branded search on Amazon, conversion on Amazon. I'd be interested to hear, as we get through the conversation, how you guys are thinking about some of that interconnectivity. But maybe I can go back to Caitlin, where maybe you had the opportunity to kind of go broad versus deep in a channel or across channels, right? As you start thinking about growth and investment, tell me a little bit about what happened. Can you give us an anecdote there?
Yeah, definitely a few lessons learned here, and we're still learning. But I think I've learned if you're choosing breadth, like in a new channel like TikTok, for example, it needs to be aggressive enough investment to prove the scale and impact after you're done with, the test or new channel. If I've learned that the hard way, if you don't test with enough budget, you get to the end and results might not prove potential good or bad. I think TikTok's an interesting one, just the sheer amount of content and focus on the channel, with it being like totally different than others. Have to have breadth behind it. And so that's one that's just top of mind, that we're in it right now. But I'm also a true believer in that we can't do everything really well. So it's like, how do we pick and choose thoughtfully and then scale these channels to impact? So for us, it's weighing what I mentioned earlier on what we're trying to accomplish, and then putting focus and doing what we're doing the right way for optimal effectiveness versus trying to do everything.
Right. And reach for the sake of reach, but if it's not enough material investment, you're dipping your toe in the water, and or you just spend, wasting 20-30% of your spend on playing the coverage game. And Molly, I know
Yeah.
in our conversations you've worked with some large global brand organizations that have a lot of retail media networks and other channels that they're managing. Maybe can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, if you all have dug into the State of Retail Media report, there's another finding in there about the number of networks that leaders and laggards are spending on in the total count. And it was one of the
Right.
places that I wanted to have a reality check and call timeout, because the stat actually looked low to me, sitting in the agency position, of how many retail media networks are out there and how many we expanded to as they propped up their different offerings. And we tried to see, to Caitlin's point, what was the right investment to try to drive impact. And I've been thinking that we might be at the inflection point with retail media to scale down from the fractured networks and go deeper with a few. Because to that question of depth versus breadth, when we're wide, we can only really stand up a few different investment types, versus when we go deep, we really can focus on a always on audience strategy for past versus lapsed, or stand up, our ongoing campaign strategy versus doing a single campaign at a time that's driven better and sustainable volume and learnings to apply, where we choose to focus on.
And as you think about that breadth, I mean, and you're going to the 15th or the 20th network, I mean, is the limitation more on your like the ability to actually execute at smaller scale, across another 10 more networks from a team and a small budget perspective? Like, I mean, I'm getting at, is this like making the argument for programmatic retail media in the long tail?
Yes and no. I think yes, it does take hands and bodies. You can also partner with someone like a Sky to be able to bring that all into the same place. But I think it's also within strategies too. Where are you applying the same strategy everywhere versus where are you
Hmm.
really trying to unpack some of those data
Right.
signals, and have a deeper strategy that may, with one, that may have halo to the rest.
Yeah. So maybe it's just like, hey, if I'm checking the box on site for, the 20th and 30th and there in between networks, I'm covering my branded search. Defense is there, but I'm not going to go do a white glove strategy on those channels and think about it in tranches potentially.
And will
Any other
that
thoughts
actually move the
on,
needle more than others too?
yeah, yeah. Any other thoughts on budget allocation from either of you, or maybe we can move on to another meaty topic that seems to be perennial favorite in the State of Retail Media report. Um, any other thoughts? Otherwise, I will click. I'll do it.
Let's move on.
Let's
All
go.
right, sweet. So we got another audience poll. So that means wake up, have another sip of coffee. This is going to get real. Incrementality, that meaty subject, is a top three budget decision factor, as you can imagine. How many brands are making major budget decisions without actually measuring? How many brands are making major budget decisions without actually measuring? You get one pick to rule them all. I'll spare you my Jeopardy whistling, but that's what I'm thinking in my head right now. All right. Oh, here it comes. Interesting, fairly interesting spread here. Okay. It's told me I did not answer the question. So, how
Hmm.
many brands are making major budget decisions without actually measuring it? We have 36% are saying 47%, 26% are saying 31%. It's kind of tapers off, right? Okay, so let's see what the State of Retail Media survey said. Okay, so 50% in the survey said they were measuring at a basic level. 31% basically were not measuring or were planning to start in 2026. That means they were making most of their budget decisions without really any rigorous approach. Possibly that's organizationally related. There's a lot of organizations where it's set, it's pure trade spend. It is what it is as a percentage of sales. You're not being asked to measure that deeply. That said, there is a solid 20% that are good or extremely good, and I want to meet the extremely good. I think we have them on the not webinar here today with Molly and Caitlin. Um, let's go back to Molly and Caitlin. Incrementality being a top three budget decision factor. Uh, you know, how many brands are making major budget decisions without actually measuring? That was the question. So maybe back to Caitlin. What are leaders doing that allows them to actually act on incrementality and not just report it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the hardest question to answer. I will say that you have to put a lot of pieces together, but I'll share kind of like what we're doing that has helped us as we've grown as an organization and as media dollars have grown. I think bringing the right mind, like insights and minds together with an unbiased approach to decision make is really important. We brought in an MMM tool a couple of years ago that has been huge for us. I would say like we don't allow the model to, make all the decisions and the models are not perfect by any means, but it allows us to ask the right questions. And I think that's the most important because if we're seeing indicators come through on the MMM, then we can support it through with an incrementality study from Amazon or Instacart. And then we are able to kind of trend a few pieces of data together to help make decisions. I would say the other thing is on those incrementality studies, just like asking for benchmarks from our partners. Some of these incrementality studies are totally new. So it's like, can we get a CPG benchmark or category benchmark to hold ourselves accountable to for a comparison game? Because it's also really hard to compare the incrementality studies across partners. So those are the questions we're asking ourselves as we're kind of looking at the data to then action.
I love the concept of the unbiased minds that you have to bring together that then work potentially with models, MMM tools that aren't perfect. Within any model, you're going to have weighted variables. Is it truly understanding the tactics and goal? It's going to be different by, life cycle of product, brand, channel, right? Molly, can you elaborate in this area?
Yeah, I think the acting on it is actually really key, especially in my world and where I sit is we're partnering with, different organizations, and while they may be able to understand it and make decisions off of it, we then want to be able to optimize off of it too. So I do think investing in tech to enable that optimization really is key to be at that extremely good level, to be consistently iterating on it.
Hold on, I just got to finish sending you the Venmo for saying that as a person providing tech. I mean, what I hear and what I see, in the market, right, is, a paradigm is needed, and the paradigm is gonna shift again per major, tranche of what you're working on, a product, a channel, right? And having that flexibility, using a variety of different tools to get to even tools that give you a sense of relativity, like benchmarking, right? That starts to give you the picture. Then those unbiased minds can take that picture because the human strategist is ultimately what's having to work with this and say, all right, what is truly incremental? What is North Star for the goal of this product? Is it trying to grow new to brand sales more so than it is liquidating because you're in a seasonal category, right? There's going to be a lot that's going to need to come together, and it's never a silver bullet strategy. But right now, with so many proliferated walled gardens, the apples, oranges, pears, bananas, strawberries, like at least you can get to some baseline normalization using a data model, using technology that gets you to at least, something you can analyze, run models against, pair with a variety of different incrementality measurements to get to that paradigm. So, where do the laggards stall, right? We kind of talked about the maybe where the leaders are here, but is it the people that they have working on it? Do they not have the unbiased minds? Are they not investing in tech, org design? Are they incentivizing, improperly? Molly, can you continue to elaborate there?
I mean, to double down on what I said, I would think that a laggard would stall with a tech investment because while there are solutions out there, it could be, that higher priced item where you have to really decide to go in, Nick, exactly to your point, to have a solution that you are going to decide in and say, this is our one standard approach. And there are those tech companies out there. Now, what may stall deciding on a tech could be, the organization, different people, different stakeholders, but I think you at least have to have that one model to look at to be able to respond to because otherwise you are just inherently saying like yes we all want to go after an incremental sale but if you don't have a data point to look at to truly show to the leaders in your organization or to everybody to get on board to at least like try to act on it and see what it does that could be where teams are stalling out.
Yeah, having that reference point, even coming back to benchmarks there, absolutely. Like a lot of the technology that we focused on for incrementality testing has been how do we more rapidly get to stat sig by projecting and using saturation curves. So because these can be a very expensive thing. Oh, was it incremental? Well, let's spend all of the amount that it was incremental on testing it. Like, okay, is that a zero sum game? Caitlin, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Molly on the tech piece. And I'd say, like, just to add to that, the tech has to be working in lockstep with the people in the organization and the decision makers to bring all the information together with clear performance targets going into a test or going into a budget scale. I think at the end of a test or investment, we always ask ourselves, how do we decide if it's successful? So going into that, you have to set targets beforehand to help measure the incrementality. Otherwise, you might be saying like everything's great, but it's like great on what scale? And I think you need to bring teams together to show that impact because some of these channels are driving impact not just on their own channel, but other channels as well. So it gets complicated. So you have to bring, everyone must be working in lockstep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would tell you from someone who's spent their entire career focused on enterprise tech, the best thing you can do as an agency or a brand, any customer of technology, and earmuffs to any of my product team or other folks doing delivery, but you have to push on the tech. It's very often it's going to come out of come out of the box and be mostly what you need. But the innovation happens when you, as the customer, say, "Hey, look, my MMM, like that model isn't exactly what I want. I want to weight these strategies differently. How do I influence and control? What is it? What are the data I need to be putting into this to get the most out of it? How can you do more for me?" Those are the tense conversations and healthy tension, I should say, that really drives getting you to the paradigm you're talking about, having that reference point, being able to run your analyses, pair even together different approaches to incrementality measurement, which is something we've seen in our platform, pairing our iROAS metric with the likes of partners of ours like incremental.com, where clients are very focused on seeing both sides of that, which are slightly different approaches. So I would encourage you as you guys do invest in tech and become leaders in this space that you're, continuing to press and get what you need for your organization. And to that complexity comment, Caitlin, I think it's a really good segue into our next section, which interaction effect. Like incrementality is hard to measure when everything is interacting, right? We've seen so many studies now from some of our clients of the impact of TikTok on Amazon and so forth. Um, Gen AI is pretty darn good at running regression analyses, and many of them in a short minute, right, to get you some pretty interesting insights once the semantic layer has been evolved to say, hey, look, we think these channels might, interact with each other, and so that gets me into the AI topic, which, gosh, we made it 26 minutes without saying AI, which I think is a record on in 2026. Wow, 26. Oh, no, it's 27 minutes. All right. Anyway, audience poll. Almost everyone says they're using AI, but only some brands are getting real advantage from it. How many are actually using it at all, right? In the context of retail media. I love this question. Here come the numbers. Why do I love it? I mean, AI has been around. I think the godfather of AI was in the 60s. McCarthy was, at Stanford building the first kind of algorithms that are AI. We've had bidding algorithms since the early part of this century. obviously Gen AI being a new topic now, but everyone says they're using AI, but are they getting real advantage from it? Are you clicking to cast your vote to your listener and viewer? Okay. 48% said 25%, 23% said 47%, 21% said 63%, and 8% said 76%. Any That's a pretty good distribution. Pretty good distribution. Well, what did the State of Retail Media survey say? 63% are saying they're using generative AI in their retail media programs today, just using it. So that's interesting. There was about 20% of you that were on that number. Either you've been studying the State of Retail Media survey since it came out, or we want to hear your stories. So for the speakers, right? What I mean, AI is covering, as for years we've been working with bidding algorithms, a variety of different, again, saturation-based curve models for forecasting, right? What's the highest risk decision you guys as marketers currently trust with AI? Maybe Caitlin, we can start with you again.
Yeah, I mean, for years we've trusted Amazon's bid plus investments and trusted them with a lot to increase our budgets to a certain percent to performance targets and win bids, and I think that's treated us well. It's like more trust than we um, have to remind ourselves of, and I think this has evolved so much over the years, but we've always put our trust in that.
Okay. Molly, maybe what about you? I guess, I mean, Amazon's a pretty high risk place given the budgets that are flowing there, pure play, e-com. How about you?
Yeah, I love sharing with Caitlin too, because we always start at the same place where I was like, we've been trusting the AI in the platform algorithms for years, and that's a pretty powerful AI. They are, optimizing our budgets, optimizing our bids, and truly directing where spend goes. So, in thinking about this question of what's the highest risk decision that I trust generative AI with in, a conversation LLM model, what would I let the machine do that I wouldn't discuss with someone else or actually click on? I've thought about it in how consumers are using this too, in a material way of say I were to say, make me a grocery list. It's choosing which products go in with prices and maybe with features that I wouldn't have chosen and where like I wouldn't trust that yet because I want to look at the ingredients and I want to look at the different prices. So taking that into how I would work with generative AI at work and allow it to make some of those decisions for me too. I think it's primarily right now bringing more info to the front to go make some of those decisions to give me the options of here's option one or option two in terms of that list. And then still allowing it to make some of those coded adjustments. But the generative piece of where I'm allowing it to make decisions without any oversight yet has still been pretty limited.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we weren't too specific. We said highest risk decision you currently trust AI. I mean, making a Waymo making a left turn in traffic is a pretty high risk decision. But
I
within
haven't
retail
gotten to
media,
one of those yet,
yeah,
but
it's a little it's a little something, isn't it? Some people refuse, right? So that's actually the next question. So where have you refused to let AI take the wheel or take the majority of the influence of a decision, and why was that? And Caitlin, let's come back to you.
Yeah, I think like we're using the algorithm and decision making tools to feed us insights, but I think we refuse to like let it make keyword level like brand growth reach decisions. I think like Celeste, for an example, amazing tool. Team uses it to get insights, understand where we're seeing trends, and then they make decisions based on our brand goals and our reach structure. Sometimes there's a strategic competitive thing we're doing, something we're doing within category growth to reach, our core consumer. So all of that needs to be like layered on to then make the final decision. And that's where I think I would say like we refuse to let it actually like final decision make, but
Yeah.
we use it to our advantage to kind of get to those decisions as a key lever. And like, it brings in a ton of great insights that from a human standpoint, like we wouldn't have thought at, or it would have taken us longer to get to these decisions. So I think it's a huge tool and then we put the human touch on it.
data science analyst in your hands, but you're not going to give it the autonomy to go, just make those unilateral decisions that are actually making the maneuvers. You want that human in the loop. Venmo's on the way for mentioning Celeste. That's Sky's Gen AI agent tool. Really interesting roadmap to that end around the autonomy and like levels of autonomy that you can set for different agents that are going to be in our multi-agent program, where surfacing suggestions and accepting suggestions will be sort of phase two. Caitlin, I kind of think feeds into that, right? Do you, as the marketer, review this and want to let that go live? And maybe at a certain point there is a place to contain some autonomy and say, well, within these guardrails, you can make changes, but outside of that, I need to review it. Molly, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first, I am very thankful to our legal team for keeping us on track with client data permissions and different terms that we have in sharing for what we're providing internally and externally. There are some really hard lines that we'll like refuse for what's shared. That's where Celeste is actually a great partner, where we have permission that data in Sky already. So it already has the context, it has that data, but there are, other types of workflows or like kind of open agents that we have to be really critical of.
Hmm.
Um, More practically in my day to day, I refuse to let an analyst build a campaign with AI for the first time. Amazon's, rolled out their NDSP generative AI where you upload a plan and then they'll go build the campaign shell. I want my team who is um, starting and having to actually still make decisions and run and optimize these campaigns to know how to think like
Hmm.
the platforms and what all goes into those campaigns so that when they do get to a place where they can use the tools to launch quickly, that they are also able to go in, dig in, and understand what it actually is running and be able to think like we do now of how would I build
Yeah.
this from scratch to go, obtain the goals or to be able to go optimize.
Yeah, I mean, this is happening across all sorts of different industries, education. Like I want my kid to learn how to write before he lets, a chat GPT write an essay. Because you got to
Right.
edit it, you got to make it not an AI voice, but eventually you will use those tools, but you need to know what should be good and how to do it. So, all right, maybe back to you, Molly. Like, what's a workflow, maybe in your teams are managing through that AI has replaced entirely for your team, or is there even one? Not assisted, but like completely replaced.
If I think about the common deliverables again for my team, creating a plan, building a campaign, optimizing and reporting, there is not one of those from an end-to-end process that AI has replaced. I think back to the beginning of like coded decisions and like where it's operating in the background versus completely replacing. There's lots of little workflows that it has picked up though. Things like pulling a report from AMC, like our team has scripted, ingested, and but my team is still reading that report or like a deck design where you can give bullets to a script and it will make a slide. So it's definitely making us quicker. Our CEO has said AI won't replace humans, it will replace the humans who know how to use AI, will replace humans who don't. So we are using it to be able to, speed up those processes and have humans work in different areas too.
We used to have office memos back in the before email. Email didn't replace the need to communicate between the office and between employees. It innovated how that happened. Employees were still there to do that work. Obviously, not an apples to apples comparison. So let's not run an incrementality test on it. But I think it's any further thoughts, Caitlin or Molly, just on that AI section. I know we have some questions coming in about AI, so do not despair. Here at the end, we will dive in more into AI. But any other thoughts, guys? Cool.
No,
Um,
interested to hear the questions.
yeah, part four. So let's get through part four, right? Everyone agrees integration between media and commerce teams is the goal, but very few organizations have actually achieved it. How rare do you think full integration really is? Another poll, another exciting way you get to click once and have your voice heard here on the Not webinar, Retail Media Reality Check. Everyone agrees integration between media and commerce teams is the goal, but very few organizations have actually achieved it. So how rare do you think full integration really is? You didn't think there would be math or things you had to do today, and here you are. Okay, can't wait. So, okay, another fairly even distribution, but we're looking a little bit more, weighted average right there around that like high teens, low 20s, with 23% of you saying, excuse me, 37% of you saying 23%, 34% saying 12%, and then a few outliers on the high and low end of that. Let's see what the survey says. Um, so you can kind of read up the graph here, right? 36% of respondents said they were just partially integrated. 19% said limited integration. About 30% were either in progress or not integrated, and only 12% were fully integrated. So clearly shows that this is in process. Majority, right, or near majority is limited or just really about half and half, limited or in progress versus partially integrated. So enough of me rambling about that topic. The folks that are working on this with agency, internal brand. So guys, how do you think leaders are resolving friction between budget or strategy allocation in this context, given that 12% of fully integrated? Maybe Caitlin, you can dive into this first as well.
Yeah, I think I mentioned unbiased, approach earlier, and I think this is what's the most important. When we think about making some of these tough decisions, it's being able to make those tough decisions because of what the data says. And I think it's some of the toughest decisions we've made to this day to pause a channel or change a strategy with something that we may have been more comfortable with for what we've been doing for years. But we needed to pivot because of strategy or pivot channels because of where we're seeing our consumer convert that have gone the furthest for us. So I think it's having that unbiased approach to be able to make the decisions is how I always challenge team internally and challenge myself to think about it. That's led us to go, the furthest with our dollars in the long run.
Interesting. Molly, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think I have so much empathy for how hard this is. I took this really as kind of observation piece for how we work with different clients and their operational models too. And there are a lot of different org types. I think to Caitlin's point, like where we see the most success is when it truly is a decision made based off of strategy and not off of a budget, because that can be really limiting and where a lot of decisions get so tied up in a budget instead of the right strategy. So I would advise teams to go with strategy first, and then we can talk more about the operational model, organizational model that gets you there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm been through this for years, coming from the feed management world into, in marketing via feed-based channels where e-commerce systems are generating feeds that inclusive of inventory signals. Obviously stock level is super important. You don't want to be marketing if you're out of stock. But on channels like Amazon, you got suppressions, you've got content issues, you've got all sorts of operational data around the business. Are there open tickets around various issues that are happening with your relationship just functionally with the channel? And then is media aware of that? Are they riffing on that? And then those are the tactical layers. But then as you get into these strategic layers, maybe you run into some conflicts inside the organization because you know hey, a lot of times there's a sales team per retailer customer inside a big brand, and that group of unbiased minds, or that layer that isn't beholden to a specific retailer customer, might have to resolve some of those conflicts. So Caitlin, can you talk a little bit about where you've seen kind of this resolution in resolving conflict in this context?
Yeah, I think like the silos also can be like almost like a conflict underneath because if you're working in silos, we've found that like we're not making full holistic budget decisions. So we invested in a media insights and strategy role internally last year, and that's been extremely impactful for us. I think this role serves as like the unbiased party that I'm mentioning to report and suggest budget optimizations on a monthly basis, also ties measurement in, and then works on a lot of that benchmarking that we're talking about of like, how do we set our targets and make sure we're setting targets across everything we're doing, whether it's more of a shopper tactic, driving on shelf versus online conversion versus a brand initiative and pulling it through our total media strategy. So that's been really helpful. And some of the measurement stuff is the most time consuming to um, pull together for one channel, let alone tie it all together from multiple channels. So that's served us well in like a dedicated person to pull it all together and then share out the why within our broader marketing org.
Interesting. I like the specific role for the leading the unbiased minds.
Yeah.
But like, who has the final say in these leader organizations versus the laggards? Is it media team? Is it commerce? Is it this unified sort of owner across? Like how, I mean, maybe for you it's different. Maybe Molly, you see for your clients something different. But Caitlin,
Yeah,
what do you
I'd
think?
say for like growth brands, if you're trying to continue to grow households, like it has to be a unified owner because it has to be a balance between brand and driving dollars up the funnel and who you're reaching there, and then effectiveness down the funnel. We look at consideration and conversion segments. So it's kind of hard. One thing I love about the structure of Chomps and how we kind of think about how we're growing our digital media and retail media, and how my team is structured to kind of be a unified owner versus working in silos. So I unbiased say a unified owner probably is the best route and the most cohesive for decision making.
Awesome. Molly, what do you think?
Yeah, we've seen it done without a unified owner. An example of we had great data points. We're viewing market share, IROI, and MMM indicators all together. So a group of people across departments and teams and different stakes of, where that budget would go really understood the variables at play, met together and decided, what they were going to change based off of the weight of those fast factors and then cascaded that to teams. So it can work. I think again, you have to have like the right data points to look at. You have to align on what the action plan, to Caitlin's point with benchmarks that you're going to judge against to then be able to shift again. But I also lean towards probably the most efficient and effective model is to have a unified owner of a working media strategy.
Yeah, I think, coming back to your comments on tech, and this is something obviously maybe I'm biased because we build technology to support organizations like yourselves. More often than not, the approach is, hey, we've got all the media data here in this technology, we're getting a lot of insights, but it's not connected to all of the or the operational data that the business is running. And more we're seeing that theme of organizations, working with us where we have a flexible data model, we can be ingesting business data, we can be ingesting the more operational data to start to give that perspective and build dashboards and run automations that are relative to all of that operational context. And then that can give you that central reference point where everybody is, reading from the same sheet, in the organization. They can start to see, even just seeing things side by side is an amazing win in organizations where there are silos. And that's where, often that unbiased role that Caitlin, you were talking about becomes that much more powerful when they're showing a data-driven analysis. They're putting the data together and making the explanation very clear as they have to communicate across the organization. Um, any other thoughts on the org design here, guys, before we dive into maybe the last section, which will be we've had some great questions come in. I think it'll probably dive us back into AI a little bit. But any other thoughts here on org?
Just going back to it's super hard. Think that this is, crux even more than the previous conversations that we've had, that this is still one that will be a conversation point and every team will have to take differently because it is a team of humans. So that's my only closing thought.
Yeah, interesting. Any other last thoughts, Caitlin? Or
Molly said it well. I agree.
awesome. Well, we'll leave the thank you slide up here, but we do have time here for some Q&A. First couple questions that came in. First one is, okay, so agentic AI is set to change how consumers research and purchase affecting on-site advertising. However, my opinion is that retailers won't lose this revenue stream, right? Or won't allow, the industry to lose the revenue stream. So how do you think retailers will tackle agentic AI in regards to retail media? I love that question. What do you think? Molly, Caitlin, you want to dive in on that one?
Well, I may toss this back to you, Nick, because I saw a really good framework that you had of, this isn't the first time that we've had emerging networks operating both as a channel and a layer to that
Mm,
point that it will continue with the retail media networks building into their own channel, AI agents, and some of the monetization with ads in there, and then using their audiences as a layer within the LLMs. We're already starting to see that
mhm.
happen as different LLMs offer advertising and having some of that audience targeting in there too. So I don't think it will go away. It'll just shift, hopefully be less about a margin game for the RMNs and more true of a value and attention offering.
Interesting. I mean, I love the channel and layer paradigm. I think it played really well with retail media. If you looked at on-site retail media as a simple way to look at the channel, and then leveraging of, the first party data, the audiences of a retailer across all digital channels as the layer where that first party data is the gold that creates that layer across a variety of other channels. Um, I think this is playing out very similarly, right? We have a new channel, we have new services like ChatGPT, like Gemini, Google AI mode. But we have the layer of generative AI across all of these existing channels, whether it's, Sparky or Rufus, a variety of different experiences. And I think there's a lot of open questions as to how it plays out. We are in an era, if you search on Amazon, you're going to see a lot of sponsored listings as in your results. A lot more clicking around, a little bit more spray and pray. Will we see a much more curated and maybe more expensive but better performing ad unit as these more highly relevant chat conversations in this new channel evolve and take more share of kind of consumers first approach to shopping? Are there any other thoughts, Caitlin, you think in terms of how retailers are going to think about this? Obviously, they don't want to lose the traffic to their on-site, and if that falls flat, like what happens to a near $100 billion retail media market?
I think it's going to be both, and it's something we're watching closely. I am interested to see how it will evolve, and I think like the audience and the placements and how we maximize within that is top of mind. So I agree that I think both will continue, and it's going to depend on the shopper for right now.
Okay. Maybe we can move to the next question that came in. And so, at what point is incrementality data good enough to justify a budget shift? And how do you balance analytical rigor with the need to move quickly in competitive retail environments? Um,
I
either of
can,
you want to jump?
yeah, I could touch on this. I think we have like leading and lagging indicators. I think it's always something that we're talking about on like when is too long to wait to make a decision and what do we need to see. So I would say we just establish kind of like what are the things that are early reads that could start to tell us we want to watch this, or we might want to start funneling more budget and then back off if X, Y, and Z happens. So within the metrics that we have, it's like what is the reporting cycle? When are we waiting for like a key metric to a decision point versus like we can when can we use a leading indicator versus a lagging indicator to make those decisions. So I think just having that in your toolkit and knowing kind of what the indicators you're watching is how we've um, treated it versus it like slowing us down in like this good enough mindset.
Almost like having a plan, being sure of what your goals are for the test. I mean, I would even argue that trying not to waste money by doing as much scientific, readouts of it's the word I'm looking for, blanking, projections. Thank you very much of where this is going. How do I extrapolate from the data I've already seen and running algorithms against that can help there. Molly, any thoughts on the good enough question here to justify a
Well,
budget shift?
I am watching the Q&A live too, and I do see
Oh,
that there was kind of an additional question of is shifting retail media's main KPI from ROAS to IROI a solution or just shifting the mess. And I think that's the same thing of like, hey, is it good enough? Because in the same
Mhm.
way that we were maybe when retail media came out because it had sales attribution appended, it's like, great, we can see the attributed sales and what it drove, and then said ROAS is not good enough to actually tell us if our investment is working. We really need to see if the sales are incremental. And so now we're saying, great, we have a metric for that. It is good enough because it's more correlated, but I do think it is still in that correlation to an end business outcome. Now, that end business outcome may be a share, it may be a revenue, it may be a household penetration. So you have to look at where that it truly is correlating and indicating the business result that you are ultimately incentivized by and going after
Mhm.
is going to be meaningful for your business growth.
Let's shift gears. And we guys, there's so many great questions. We're not going to be able to get to all of them here in the last 7 minutes. Um, we will follow up, especially with any Sky specific questions that I see coming in. We will make sure that we reach out to y'all. We do have one though that kind of ties back. I also was going through the live Q&A. We did a question sort of about agency structure, bigger ones contributing to the silos that they agencies tend to stick to, the departments that pay their bills that maybe ties together, a little bit with another question that we had in the list. The organizations without a unified commerce media owner, what governance mechanisms usually actually work to align strategy and budget decisions. I mean, maybe it's back to a kind of a mixture of those things, and maybe Molly, from the agency perspective, you can address the first part. Um, are agency organizations kind of sticking to their silos in this context, or are you guys shifting in this
Mm.
context?
Yeah, I mean, I think I put it off and kind of said I was looking observationally at clients that we work with, but from an agency perspective, if you think about the traditional departments we have of like a creative media strategy and our analytics insights team, we truly are pulling all those teams together every single day to analyze, ideate, and then go make. And that make does take all of its different forms where it's like, okay, now go out and do what you're specialized in, whether you are creating or whether you are going and running those campaigns, whether you are creating additional models or pulling some of the insights and strategy. But for us, it's bringing them all together and breaking down the silos of not talking to each other, not having creative that's informed by media performance, not having insights that are informed by the data points. Um, so still different teams, still like same number, but bringing them together and just breaking down the silos of communication. And I think having that agency partner going back and sharing to the client organizational models too. That answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, and there was a follow-up one that maybe is more specifically can point to Caitlin or not. You can also plead the fifth, but does full integration, and then this goes back to the org structure section we were talking about, does full integration typically mean more, less, and or the same number of people in the teams, especially top of the department decision makers, if there are two VPs in charge, each in charge of one of the teams, sales and media as an example, does one of the VPs need to be reassigned or leave? I think we're starting to get into the machinations of like your unbiased mind role there. But I think the first part of the question, does full integration typically mean more, less, and or the same number of people on the teams?
I think I mean, we're a growing brand, so we're definitely like adding headcount. But as we look at our partners, we're thinking about that strategically too. So it's like, how do we enable our partners with the information to help us make decisions with the internal team? So I would say it's not like eliminating headcount. It's more just like bringing in that unbiased party to help inform and bring all the insights along. I think we've invested a lot in reporting structure, making sure everything's flowing through Power BI for us and things like that. So we have quick decisions and all the parties can see their information quickly when the month ends or whatever the period is of measurement. I think from an agency perspective, to hit on what Molly was mentioning, is um, for us, it's just like informing the agencies and as much information as possible, bringing them along on your MMM insights if it's not integrated with the agency to make sure they know the why behind what you're seeing. And like it's the same thing with silos. Like even if it's a channel they don't manage, just like how do you engage them for strategic planning to bring them along and help you make informed decisions is what we've found successful. But you have to select a true partner if you're doing that, right? It needs to be someone who is supporting the full business growth, not just the one they manage. So I just think it's strategically picking the right partner when it comes to that question.
Okay. I'm going to coalesce with 3 minutes left here, a bunch of AI questions, even from some folks who are maybe representing other technologies in the space, authoritative tools that do Amazon DSP for you that are out there coming into the questions. I love it. Love to see it. It's a great tactic. But I'm going to bring it down to a question that's, as these new surfaces, let's call it Gemini or ChatGPT, the specific question I heard was about Gemini's direct offers, not officers. Question was who's responsible? I think it's an interesting one. Like as this new channel emerges, you think about, especially in the context of Gemini, where it's a very strong relationship between Google and retailer. Google's typically not been addressing brands very much directly. That has shifted a little bit as brands are starting to really start thinking about driving traffic from Google into major retail channels, taking a little bit more control. But who's responsible for that? Is it a commerce team? Is it a media team? If these need to be funded in the future, is it a Google search team? If it's on Google, I mean, maybe even just looking broadly again at these new surfaces. What do you guys think?
For us, it's like e-com and digital, but then bringing the right teams along. Like you have to have the brand team in to make sure that the brand voice is flowing through. So that's just the way we're doing it. I don't even know if that's right yet. It's happening live, so I think
Yeah,
we'll see.
the
The
meeting
jury's
is
out on
after
that
this
one.
call, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think similarly, like our media teams, we want to be fully integrated to plan any channel, the right
Yeah.
channel. So it would, like for us, that the Google offering would be, inspired by some of those insights that we do have from our commerce enablement and other teams. But then as a decision within a media channel, it goes to like everyone, but also the one person who is responsible for making sure that we have the right activation plan um,
Mhm.
where there is attention and underpriced attention and attention that will move.
And it can be hard too if the new channel itself is not talking or doesn't have a door for the brand to walk through. And so it's like you have to then, as an agency, go to brand to the retailer partner who is having that conversation with Google and say, how do I ride along with this? Is this a co-op play for us? How can I influence it? Right? Is there a back door there to address that? It's something that retail media, we've obviously started with Amazon and Walmart. Those are very brand direct supplier direct conversations, but as these new surfaces come out, they're coming out on channels that have been very retailer centric first, or net new, and where the channel is focusing on retail first, product feeds and so forth, and that UCP conversion that can happen, right out of that new surface. Team, we've made it all the way through the hour. For those of you that have stuck with us, we really appreciate you joining. Molly from Vayner, Caitlin from Chomps, you guys are amazing to collaborate with on this. Thank you for joining us and for answering all these questions live. Again, if we didn't get to your question, we will follow up. Someone from our team, again, really appreciate everybody leaning in and staying active with us, and hope everybody has a great rest of their Thursday.